The greater sage-grouse has one of the most unique displays in the entire world, but it is also one of the most threatened birds in the entire world. And in just a short time, the bird could go extinct forever. Let's dive in. The greater sage-grouse is in the genus Centrocercus, which includes two birds, the greater sage-grouse and the Gunnison sage-grouse. Classification-wise, they fall under what is known as galliforms, or chicken-like birds. And they're in the family Phasianidae, which includes things like turkeys, partridges, grouse, as well as pheasants. The scientific name Centrocercus europhasianus literally means greater sage-grouse. And in certain contexts, some people call it the sage hen as well. Greater sage-grouse are sexually dimorphic, meaning that the males and the females do look different from one another. The males can be identified through their chubby bodies, overall large size, small head, long tail, white breast, and black belly, as well as a black throat. The females can be identified through most of those structural things as well, but they're speckled brown and gray, and they also sport a black belly. The greater sage-grouse is the largest of the grouse species. This is a western bird. At least today it is a western bird. You can find it in small parts of Utah, small parts of Colorado, small parts of Wyoming, California, Oregon, Idaho, Montana. They are named sage-grouse or greater sage-grouse because they literally live in sagebrush areas. Their diet consists of buds and leaves, and those leaves primarily come from the sagebrush plant. In fact, that makes up the majority of their total diet. However, young juvenile birds cannot actually consume sagebrush. They don't have the digestive system to be able to process that, so they actually hatch and start eating insects and forbs. And forbs are things like dandelions, for example. In fact, a mother sage-grouse, a female sage-grouse, won't pick a nesting site that doesn't have some of these things available for their chicks to begin with. Now, the nesting process is pretty interesting as well. Females do all of the work. The males are not involved at all with the young or with the female when it's time for nesting. So the females build the nests, they incubate the eggs, and they raise the young as well. Sage-grouse are a ground nesting species, and they actually lay their nests in dense vegetation, dense sagebrush. And it's actually kind of cool. The females will actually pick the dense sagebrush area, and they'll try to form a little opening on two sides in case the incubating female will have to escape one way or the other out the little openings in the density of vegetation. The nests are bowl-shaped and they're scratched into the ground, and then they are lined with leaves and twigs and some feathers as well. The cup is about 8 inches wide and about 2 to 4 inches deep on average. Sage-grouse have 4 to 11 eggs per clutch, and they have one of the longest incubation periods of about 25 to 29 days. So almost an entire month of incubating those eggs. The eggs are typically a palish green color with dark marking. What's cool about the chicks though is that when they hatch, they are almost immediately able to take care of themselves. In fact, they can feed themselves within minutes of hatching. And within 10 days, they can actually fly short distances. And then in about 5 weeks, they're totally good to go. They can totally fly longer distances all on their own. Now, the greater sage-grouse have one of the most amazing behaviors in the entire avian world, and their breeding display is absolutely incredible. This breeding display is called lekking. Now, a lek is a gathering site that males and females come together for courtship. The males will actually perform an intricate choreographed dance while the females actually judge them. We'll get into this a little bit later, but a lek, the site that they choose for this, is a traditional site that these grouse come back to year after year. It is part of their culture, it is part of their tradition, and it's absolutely incredible. Males are extremely territorial on these lek sites. In fact, males will defend a territory of just a couple yards in diameter. And when other males intrude on that space, they actually spar with one another. Most of the time, that's just kind of hitting each other with their wings and their feet, and it doesn't actually cause any real damage, but it's definitely a way for them to try to assert dominance and gain their territory. To attract a mate, males will actually inflate air sacs on their chest. These greenish air sacs actually also make popping noises as they crank their necks back and forth. Take a listen. These displays take place from March to May, and they start at dawn every morning for weeks on end. The males can gulp up to a gallon of air to perform this display, and they can do so up to 10 times a minute for hours on end. Now, despite the males strutting around and acting all tough, they're actually not the ones in charge at all. The females are definitely the ones in charge. Females will choose a male by crouching and spreading its wings to let that male know that they have been chosen. Now, despite there being dozens of males at a lek site, only 1 or 2 males will be chosen, and all the other ones are going to be ignored, and all the females will breed with either 1 or 2 of the main selectors. Again, after the lekking season, the males actually just leave, and they leave the females and the young to fend for themselves. Now, that being said, greater sage-grouse actually have a variety of different predators. In the avian world, the golden eagle is one of the only birds that can take down a full-grown grouse, and they do, making them one of the most dangerous predators to the greater sage-grouse. Common ravens and black-billed magpies will also go after nests and cause damage there by eating the eggs or going after the young. From the mammal side of things, you have coyotes, badgers, ground squirrels, raccoons, weasels, and bobcats. Most of these are a threat to the nests and not the greater sage-grouse themselves, although a few of those larger predators will definitely go after a full-grown grouse if it's available for the taking. Snakes are also a concern for a greater sage-grouse nest, so there's threats all over the place for these sage-grouse, like most birds, to be honest. Greater sage-grouse historically used to be 16 million strong, but they have actually declined all the way down to about 200,000 today. Their biggest threats actually are humans, and it's mostly land use stuff. So when land gets converted over to agriculture, telephone lines get put in, utility centers get put in, and another big one, roads. They're among the most at-risk species, or the species that are declining the most rapidly in our country, and definitely merit a response from us to be able to save these species before it's too late. Now, tips for birders. I know a lot of people want to go see greater sage-grouse or even Gunnison sage-grouse if that's possible, but I would suggest you do so with caution. Leks are extremely sensitive to disturbance, and actually a lot of them are closed to the public. The best leks to visit if they're available in your area or areas that you're traveling to are those that include built-in blinds that people can observe from a safe distance, or a guide that knows the area and knows the ethics involved with viewing a greater sage-grouse. If you do come across a lek by yourself, the best thing that you can do is use your vehicle as a blind. Stay a safe distance away from the lek, do not disturb the lek, and view the birds from your vehicle. Just look out the window. Don't step out of your vehicle because that could risk disturbing this important courtship display that goes on, and stay as quiet as you possibly can as well. And now for some fun facts on the greater sage-grouse. Females have specialized vision to assess a male's display. They watch for symmetry, timing, and feather precision. Recent research using robotic female decoys shows that females can notice tiny differences in male display accuracy, down to a millisecond. Talk about pressure, that's absolutely insane. Think of them as one of the most critical dance choreography judges out there in the entire universe. Because sage-grouse eat mostly sagebrush, which is full of toxic compounds like monoterpenes, I think I'm saying that right, they have evolved special gut adaptations and liver enzymes to detoxify it. But that also gives them a distinctive smelly scent, which could serve as a social or sexual cue during lekking season as well. So they employ cologne and perfumes to help attract mates. They're pretty cool birds. They're also considered a landscape species, meaning if sage-grouse are thriving, so are hundreds of other species that depend on the sagebrush biome. So scientists use sage-grouse as kind of a catalyst to understand how the environment is doing as a whole for a lot of these other species that rely on it. I mentioned this before, but up to 90% of females on a lek will choose the same 1 to 2 males. So even though dozens dance for weeks on end, most will never get to pass on their genes. This is an extreme example of sexual selection in action. Lastly, back in the early 2000s, greater sage-grouse were dying off dramatically. Listing the bird as endangered would have impacted 11 states in the US, including ranchers, energy companies, state governments, federal agencies. So in 2015, after years of back and forth debate and wasted time, the US Fish and Wildlife decided not to list the bird as endangered, despite having lost 90% of its original population from historic levels. Now, this was largely because a voluntary conservation effort, which had never been seen before in history, has started to take shape. Federal and state agencies work together to designate priority habitat management areas. Private landowners and ranchers enrolled in conservation programs and adjusted their grazing practices. Oil and gas companies voluntarily avoided certain areas or changed development plans altogether. And $750 million was invested into habitat restoration, land use planning, and research. Again, this was back in 2015. However, starting in 2017, the Trump administration rolled back most of these protections, weakening the habitat designations and allowing more development in these areas. The greater sage-grouse continues to decline in many areas, and some scientists argue that without proper protections, especially after the rollbacks, this may not be enough to save the species. So to you, the viewer, I ask you, what are the greater sage-grouse worth? Having seen the display of the greater sage-grouse myself, I can tell you that it's one of the most magical things on the entire planet. Like all living things on Earth, I can tell you that they are worth more than gold, they are worth more than oil, they are worth more than human greed. The greater sage-grouse is being wiped out because of us. So it is our responsibility to step up and save them. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you all next time on Bright Eyed Birding Learn.